If you're a veteran and you're going to buy your first home, then watch this video because there's a good chance that, in fact, there's a 90% chance that you've already gotten some bad information regarding the VA loan. My name is George. I'm a real estate veteran. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I've used a VA loan multiple times. I've helped many VA buyers and sellers buy and sell here in St. Louis. So I want to walk you through step by step what you want to do if you're buying your first home with a VA loan. I don't want your experience to be like, what happens after you eat a veggie and cheese omelet MRE. It's a terrible, terrible disaster. Step one is understanding what you do and don't have with a VA loan. So it's important to recognize that the VA does not guarantee, inspect, or have any part in the process whatsoever except to give you a certificate of eligibility. But what you need to know is that you're going to have some costs associated with it. Just because it's 0% down, that's the down payment part for the loan. That's not talking about the closing costs or the earnest money or the inspection that's associated with it. So it's important to know you're going to have money out of pocket before you ever get to closing. A couple things that you need to know you're going to spend money on. First is the earnest money. In my market, it's usually 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $250,000 house, that's $2,500 that you're going to put as part of the contract and say, hey, this is my good faith deposit, and you're going to get that money back into your closing costs when it's time to close. So that's great news, but also bad news because you have closing costs. Usually about 2 to 3% of the loan value, because you still have to pay the people that are going to originate the loan, and then you have to build your escrow account. At least here in St. Louis, in the state of Missouri, taxes are paid in arrears, and so is insurance. That means they're paid at the end of the year. That means you have to have an escrow account, and it's built the day you close. That's a part of your closing costs. And then you have your title fees that are going to make sure that nobody's going to come after you and say, hey, you owe us money for work done on this property because you bought this house. That's why you want to have title insurance. With that being said, let's talk about the 3 people that can actually kill your deal before you ever get started. That's your lender, your agent, and an uninformed seller. An uninformed seller really gets to an uninformed agent, and if you don't have a good buyer's agent that can help explain the process of what it looks like to go through a VA loan to the listing agent, then to the seller, that can be a challenge because VA loans have a stigma that the values are going to come in low, that the appraiser is going to hit just goofy things, which they can or they can't. It really depends on the appraiser. So having these 3 people in your corner when you start the process, except for the seller, of course, when you have them in your corner, it's going to make the process a whole lot easier, and you're going to be a lot less frustrated, and you're actually going to be able to buy the house that you really want to buy and not just settle for something. So let's go ahead and start with the lender. You want to make sure that this lender is taking you through the entire pre-approval process, not just pre-qualification, because the difference is a pre-qualification is an automated underwriting system that's just looking at the credit score and the income that is stated, not verified. A pre-approval talks about the income that's verified, the assets that are actually owned. And so what you want is a lender that's going to get you pre-approved before you ever start looking at houses. Because what's going to happen is that a VA loan offer is going to be more scrutinized than your typical FHA conventional loan. The questions that you really want to ask a VA lender: how many VA deals do you do on the regular basis? What's your understanding of the VA guidelines? If I'm looking at a house and I have questions, or maybe my agent has questions, how well do you understand the guidelines for us to be able to send you pictures at the house and get your opinion whether or not a VA appraiser would actually flag it as a red flag, a condition to the appraisal, to the funding, or not? After asking those questions, you want to ask them, what is the process in the event that the property doesn't actually appraise? It's called tidewater, and if they don't know that, then that is kind of a red flag that, hey, maybe I need to keep interviewing. Maybe they forgot, and so give them an opportunity to explain what it is if they don't remember or don't know what it's called. But that's what you're looking for from a VA lender. You want to make sure they understand the guidelines, not just for the borrower, but for the property, because those are 2 different things. And then you want to make sure that they understand the process in the event that the property doesn't actually appraise. Now, when it comes to your buyer's agent, those are some of the same questions you can actually ask them. I think it's reasonable that if a buyer's agent has 2, 4, maybe 5 transactions representing a VA buyer, I think that's probably a good amount of experience, unless, of course, it was 10 years ago. I'm talking in the last 12 to 24 months, and I say 4 to 5 deals because realistically, at least in St. Louis, there aren't a ton of VA borrowers buying homes with the VA loan. So 2 to 4 deals should give you a good idea of what to look for in the appraisal, what to look for at a property while you're walking a property to understand, okay, are these going to be red flags or not? And can we get the seller to agree upfront that if these items come up on the appraisal, will you help us work through them, because the buyer is not going to be able to do that. The next question you want to ask a buyer's agent, and this may be a little bit of a gotcha, but an experienced VA agent, an agent that's represented VA borrowers, will be able to answer this. What do you say to the listing agent prior to sending the offer? What you're really looking for is an agent that's going to advocate for you up front when it comes to writing a VA offer for that house. You want to make sure that they're going to establish communication on the phone. I know millennials and the generation after us, we don't like to get on the phone and have a conversation. Every VA borrower that I work with, I make sure I call and say, hey, my name is George. I'm working with a VA borrower. I don't see any of these issues, or I do see these issues. Would your seller be able to accept a VA offer? The reason you want to make sure that they're open to it is that in the event you run into something goofy like leaves in the gutter, which I have had happen, you want to make sure they're open and they're not going to put up a bunch of resistance, especially if you get in there and find out there's a lot of problems in the inspection, because at least in our market, the inspection occurs and then the appraisal happens. And sometimes the seller can get flagged for 2 sets of things. And then throw in the occupancy inspection, your seller might get flagged with 2 or 3 sets of items that they have to complete just to be able to pass the property to you. So it's important to make sure that you have a seller that's ready to do work. I had a seller, I reached out to the agent, I said, hey, I have a VA borrower, I saw some peeling paint up on the fascia board by the gutters. Would your seller be able to do the work for us in the event the VA appraisal flags this as a red flag as a condition to the appraisal? She said no. That seller is old. They don't want to hire anyone. They would rather offer credits and be done with it. They don't want to orchestrate contractors in and out of the house and get lien waivers and receipts. So those are important questions to ask before you ever go look at the property. Step 4 is understanding what homes will and won't appraise with a VA appraisal. Now, you can't do any sort of the DIY projects that you would like to do on a home. Like, for example, if the basement or the bathroom is unfinished and it's down to the studs, that is not going to fly for a VA appraisal. All the walls, all the floors, everything has to be completely sealed up. Why? Because the VA wants to loan on properties, they want to guarantee on properties that the borrower can move into immediately. Step 5 is pretty simple. Write strong offers. And I'm not saying overpay, but what I'm saying is that if you're in a seller's market like my market, you have to be willing to pay market value if you want to get into a home that you really want. So you have to be willing to pay what it's worth. And so write strong offers. If it's been on the market and it's the first weekend and you would rather negotiate $5,000, $10,000, you might be better off going to look at homes that have been sitting on the market, because those are probably the sellers that you want to work with. You want to get closing costs or a price reduction, or you want to bring that price down into a budget that you're more comfortable with, then I recommend that you look at homes that have been on the market for a little while, or you reduce that expectation and lower your budget, lower your search criteria to look at homes that better align with that versus what you're pre-approved for. Hey, if you watched all the way to the end, I appreciate it. Your likes, your shares, your comments, subscribing. It means a lot. I appreciate it. And I was a first-time VA borrower, and I had no clue what I was doing, even though I was an agent and represented myself. So I hope this video is helpful to anybody that's watching and you're a first-time home buyer and you're using the VA loan. Like, share, subscribe, and let me know, is there anything that you need help with down in the comments below?